All right, welcome again, everybody, to another edition, special edition of Spectrum Cast. Again, this episode is focused on modern data protection. And this week, we're going to have a conversation around why protecting metadata is so important when doing backups. Sean, you've done an outstanding job as our host, so why don't you take it away and lead us here this week?
No pressure though,
Okay.
just no pressure at all.
Okay. Well, I guess a good place to start is let's maybe start with the question of, like I always do, what in the world is metadata? Because I've heard that term for many years in this business. I've even used that term, but somebody want to take a shot at what that means and what it is with regard
Oh, I know
to
I know
general
this one.
products or our products. Okay.
I know this one.
You're up, Randy.
Metadata is data about data.
Okay.
It's
Very
that
good.
simple. So it's creation date, owner, file size, file type. There can be a bunch of different dimensions of metadata. So there's kind of the basics that are the file or object level data points, and then there's also enhanced or extended metadata that could include some other attributes as well. So simply put, that's what metadata is.
Very good description. And with regard to our particular products, our data protection products, right, the metadata also stores some other important information about where the data is protected to, right? Is it in the
Mm.
cloud? Is it on tape? Is it in multiple places? Is it suitable for tiering? All of those other types of things that we use to basically enable functionality uh, in the product. Anybody want to add to that, or Tricia, you want to add anything
Oh
to that?
yeah, the metadata in Spectrum Protect is really rich, and it's that metadata that gives us a lot of the functionality that our competitors can't even do. So when we talk about things like reclamation, when we talk about things tiering from one type of storage to another, um, all of this is because of the metadata. And we even have a lot of third-party products like content management products using our metadata to store specific information about their product and how they're using our storage inside of our metadata. So for instance, a content management might send us an archive and send us with it a tag that we will put into our metadata so that when that content management needs to retrieve it, it's able to pull off of that tag. And so because we are using a DB2 database to store all of this, we have that rich capability to do everything from select statements to um, exposing the data to the metadata to other products who do monitoring. So very rich and very important with Spectrum Protect.
So, Tricia, can I just follow that up and ask you a question? I've heard a lot lately, especially around the Spectrum Protect portfolio, about doing special things with just the metadata. So I do a backup, I collect all the information, but now we have capabilities to do things around just the metadata. Why would I do that?
So some of the new functionality around Spectrum Protect is about protecting our metadata. So it used to be a traditional backup to either file or to tape. And when you got to protect the metadata, because without it, your physical copies of the data, which are sitting out in the storage pools and all, are useless because we write them out in our own proprietary method. So the metadata is required in order to access the data that's sitting in our storage pool. But on top of that, we have products like Spectrum Discover who can mine our data, our metadata, and start looking at bigger patterns of usage and who's backing up the type of data, what's out there. So this helps us then look at the entire IT department and understand mega trends from that metadata.
Yeah, and I think Discover also is an interestingly timed solution in our portfolio, because if you look out in the industry, metadata enrichment and enhancement and curation and really leveraging more value out of metadata is a really hot segment of the market right now, because people are recognizing that as data gets bigger and faster and more diverse and there's more data types, spread out over multiple environments, simply understanding what's where and what the temporal aspects and the specific definitional characteristics of the data are becomes really, really important. And managing that across multiple disparate environments is a challenge, right? So Discover is a great solution to kind of help bring that together into that common repository of metadata that drives a lot of those value added capabilities you just mentioned.
When I heard us come out with the integration last year of Spectrum Discover and Spectrum Protect, I instantly thought, like you did, Randy, just mentioned that the fact that now we can get even more intelligent about the data inside of our backup. And we've been talking a lot over the last 18 to 24 months about data reuse and being able to leverage the content that's in that backup repository. This is another example of how you can leverage it and add intelligence to not only your tier one platform, but what's happening in tier two. Do I tier that data? Can I use it for compliance? What type of knowledge can I extract from that to basically make my environment more efficient, thereby, i.e., whatever IT shop wants to do, save some money, right?
Yep, yeah, and it also enhances the ability to automate, because now with the sophisticated ingest capabilities and auto tagging capabilities of something like Discover, as data is being absorbed and ingested and categorized and cataloged and classified, you can add additional tags to it, so you can identify, GDPR compliance or some specific characteristic or dimension of the data for further analysis maybe down the road, as opposed to having to go, rehydrate a big data set and then go look for all of those things individually. So it really introduces a lot of interesting opportunities for automation and more efficiencies.
Do you ever separate the metadata from the data?
Sure. I mean, there can be cases where, for instance, let's use that previous example. Maybe you've got a big research data set, and it could be petabytes of data, and you want to go do some analysis or research passes on it to look for certain characteristics or passes or patterns, maybe, rather than, again, rehydrating that giant data set. The metadata associated with that data is probably significantly smaller. Might be cached on a flash device somewhere. You can read it in a microsecond. Get your select list, and this goes back to old, like, relational database theory from 30 years ago, right? You do the high order selects first, and you narrow down the filters so that you're retrieving the smallest amount of data. That now also applies to metadata across lots of different things, I would presume, including backups and data protection metadata, which is Tricia's area of expertise, much more so than mine. But it just seems like it's going to improve efficiency and provide a lot more advanced automation.
Yeah, and I see a lot of our third-party products that are mining our metadata and creating everything from reports to monitoring programs using just that. They're not really looking at the data. They're just taking that meta information to do these types of informational pieces. And customers are paying for these. These are critical. Customers want that. Now, Spectrum Protect does have built in the operations center, the reporting in the operations center, the ability to do the select statements. But as we've seen with these third-party products, there's a whole market out there for taking that the step further and providing what you're talking about, Randy.
This idea of separating the data from the metadata brings up a subject I might maybe like to touch on. In Spectrum Protect and Spectrum Protect Plus, as we've kind of implied, the metadata is critical for using the data that is being protected with those products. And I know we've changed the way we protect or the number of places that we can store that data in recent releases, and have a lot of enhancements going on there. I don't know if somebody wants to talk about that.
Yeah, one of the ways we can now store it is in the cloud. So you can actually back up your Spectrum Protect database, which is our meta information, and send it to the cloud. And what this enables you to do is to have an offsite copy of your meta information in case there is a disaster. You can easily access that from any place that cloud is accessible. And so that kind of opens up how your DR works as well, because now I can have my metadata and my data being stored in the cloud and do even a full cloud recovery without even pulling it back into an IT center.
Right. So it brings a lot of different options for doing hybrid solutions for doing disaster recovery, right? Rather than having to have a whole data center to be able to do disaster recovery, now you can maybe use the resources of a cloud to do it on an as-needed basis, or to reduce the resources you need to have on standby.
And I would assume that having that enriched metadata, where, for instance, you store maybe the fingerprint or kind of a checksum or some kind of a definitional definitional data point for a specific object or data set or file system even, the ability to then go quickly analyze those looking for deviations or variations in patterns over time would be much, much faster, doing it on the metadata level, obviously, than having to, again, rehydrate the base, the base data itself. So it just logically seems like it's going to introduce a ton of efficiencies in any recovery process.
Well, even in the backup process, it's already introduced a ton of efficiency. So it's not just on the recovery, but it's because of the metadata and the history that we have that Spectrum Protect can do things like incremental forever backups, where we're only backing up new or changed files. That's metadata.
So, Sean, you said something that was pretty interesting and made me start thinking. In our very first podcast, we talked about architecting backup for scale. And part of the things we talked about in order to get that, it's not necessarily backing up the petabyte of data because that happens over time, but it's the recovery of so much data. And one of the things I just kind of heard is if I can recover the metadata and I can classify that a little bit better and understand my information better, I can actually pull pieces back and actually meet some of my SLAs for this massive amount of data, but I can do it piecemeal, but I can do it intelligently because I have this metadata concept and I understand what's going on, right?
Yep, absolutely. And that's a very good point. And I mean, let's be honest. Disaster recovery is basically like an insurance policy, right? And I can't tell you how many customers I visited over the years, and not small customers, but large customers who may not have had a complete disaster recovery plan for all of their nodes or for their most important nodes. And I think having the option to use a cloud or to use the cloud for that particular function can help at least take them part of the way toward a disaster recovery solution. And it all comes down to meeting your SLAs, understanding what you can do, and using the resources you have to meet those.
Yeah, I mean, I think as metadata continues to evolve and expand, and capabilities like those offered by Discover in terms of curation and automated tagging and enrichment and cataloging and quick search and so forth, it's going to continue to unlock new capabilities, new workloads, new value add solutions, either from us or from third parties. We spoke to Predator, which is one of our big data protection resellers in the marketplace, and they talked a lot about some of the capabilities they're offering as value adds to their clients based on the very sophisticated metadata catalog that's part of the SP kind of framework. So again, it really, there's a lot of value locked in the metadata, and I think as we continue to get better and more sophisticated at extracting it, it's going to introduce a lot of really, really interesting new opportunities.
Another area I'm seeing is with retention, especially for like regulatory requirements, and metadata becomes very critical then because they want to see the chain for when that was backed up, if it's been altered, if it's been touched, if it's been moved, and that all becomes real critical in the regulatory requirements or in judicial cases of
Yep.
understanding the
chain of custody and discovery.
Yep.
Well, right. And that's one of the features we've just recently added to Protect, right? Which is doing long-term retention and recording how this long-term retention was done, when it was done, and who's making the changes to it, so that you can have that chain of custody, so to speak, or this idea of who did what when, and be able to show that.
And making sure that metadata is preserved for the life of the data. And that's one thing with the retention sets that's definitely.
Yeah, it makes everything auditable, right? So that's important. And one thought that popped in my head, and again, you guys are the data protection gurus, but I presume that it's increasingly important that the data and the metadata be in sync and backed up simultaneously and protected in a very similar way, because arguably the metadata is every bit as important as the data itself. I mean, does that introduce new risk or new levels of risk exposure for cyber attacks and the like? Because if I'm a clever cyber criminal or state sponsored data terrorist, I'm going to go try to target your metadata because it's faster, it's smaller footprint, it's easier, I can probably get to it more easily, and it's going to be something I can disrupt very quickly. So is that true?
That's very true. And that's why we've always preached that you've got to do your backups of your Spectrum Protect database, but even more so now, and making sure those database backups are on immutable storage. So either on tape or if you're feeling secure with that, on the cloud.
It's it's an interesting discussion. I mean, we had our brief talk about cyber resiliency, but to the best of my knowledge, our products haven't really been attacked like that yet. But it's
That we know about.
maybe you have a future in cybercrime, Randy.
Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. Don't jinx
Well,
it.
I mean, what one of the things that I've heard and seen attacked in many cases is Active Directory, which is kind of a similar idea, right? But Active Directory, I suppose, is more ubiquitous and more accessible to these cyber criminals, and
Yeah.
which
I
is
mean,
not a good way to have protection, right? But it's just a fact.
It just occurred
right?
to me that given the increasing importance of metadata and the increasing, criticality of it to the whole data lifecycle, if I'm clever, that's going to be an obvious target vector for me, right? Because again, I don't have to go crawl through 100 petabytes of data. I can crawl through 5 megabytes and do it in,
Add to
a
that the
microsecond.
fact that like Spectrum Protect keeps a lot of its own encryption keys inside of the metadata. And so if you lose that metadata, you can't access that data either at all, no way, because the data is encrypted and the encryption keys have just been lost. So it becomes even more critical, to your point.
I think you bring up a couple good points, Randy. So we talked, Sean, as you said last week, about cyber resiliency and how important, now we're talking about how important the cyber resiliency is for the metadata. In addition, you brought up something pretty interesting a bit ago, is Predator. And I actually wanted to, Predator is a partner of IBM's, and recently Randy and I have been doing more special editions of Spectrum Cast around technology partners with our data protection portfolio. And one of them is Predator, but I encourage everyone to go look on Seismic. There's a whole list of technology partners that partner with IBM that do take advantage of the metadata to be able to build out new, interesting, unique solutions to meet customer needs that maybe Protect or Plus in and of itself doesn't fulfill wholly, but with an add-on like one of our partners, we can clearly do that. So I think that's pretty important.
I was just going to say, as a matter of fact, in many cases, we have competing partners who do, in many cases, the same thing, right? But maybe do it in different ways or for different use cases, which is a real benefit to the Spectrum Protect portfolio, right? The fact that we have these partners in this rich environment where our partners can add value like that.
I think one of the benefits, of us having longevity in the industry is we have exactly that, Sean. We've got a lot of partners who've decided to work with us because we have that capability and longevity in the marketplace. Not something you see with the traditional new vendors. Some of them claim they have some of those features. Others, they don't have the well-roundedness that Protect or Plus have today. I wanted to thank everyone for having this conversation. I know it's not a huge topic, data at scale, going to the cloud, et cetera, but it's a pretty important topic because I don't think a lot of people think as they're doing backups of all the things that can go wrong, this is just another one of those things. And if you're not paying attention and architecting your backup properly, all of a sudden some things just might not work right. So
because we are here to give you more things to worry about.
That's our function. Job.
Not really. Well, that's a great point, though, that it really is important, and it's going to become increasingly important, too.
And don't forget, before we leave, like we did last week, we do have our Technical University coming
Plug
up.
for TechU.
If you just Google IBM Technical University, it'll pop up. And this year, there are lots of good sessions on Protect and all of the other storage technologies that IBM is offering. And it's really deep sessions, too, that are very technical. They're doing additional tech sessions on OpenShift and Red Hat. So a lot of our integrations with those. So I'm really excited about the content. It's going to be the first time we're doing a virtual conference, so that's going to be a little interesting. We're going to have to see how it goes
the virtual
there.
Conference is allowing more people to speak, which is nice. So you'll not just be hearing from 3 or 4 speakers. We have a really big cast of
Yeah,
characters.
and it actually makes it easier to engage. I mean, you can sit at your desk and consume the content, which is great. And we're also, just to reiterate, doing a launch as well on the 26th, I believe. So if you're already participating, or even if you're not, definitely check out the launch. There's a lot of cool stuff coming in Q4 and beyond. So
Yeah,
Glad you
but
mentioned
the bad news is you don't get to go to Disney World, which I'm really disappointed in. But
is that really
I'm
bad
hopeful.
news, though? I'm not sure that's bad news, but
Depends on your
okay.
perspective, I suppose.
Stay away from the COVID mouse.
Yeah, right.
Also out on my YouTube channel, there are some things on SQL queries, and we do have a Discover video, Spectrum Protect with Discover, that's going to be coming out within a week or so. One of our
Awesome.
colleagues is just finishing that up, so that'll give you some more insight on how those two work together.
Cool.
Great. So I say we'll wrap up this session. Everyone stay tuned for next week. And don't forget, register for TechU. Again, as Randy mentioned, we're doing an announcement. A lot of good things around protection being announced. A lot of good sessions at TechU. So I thank you. And you guys, anyone who wants to provide us a topic to have a discussion on, please do. You can reach out to us, whether it be through LinkedIn or through the storage community channel. Thank you very much. And or Slack.
Social media.
Social media.
Find us on social media.
Yeah.
So thank you all and have a great day.